Hello and welcome to Brain Trust Live number 507.
This week on the podcast, early voting numbers. We've got them. We don't know what they mean, but don't worry, nobody does.
And the Trump Nazi rally adds insult to injury by denying New Yorkers their daily bagel run.
Plus, Harris's ability to stay on message in front of television cameras is expiring.
And the Beyhive and KHive finally become one.
Plus, the latest debacle at the LA Times and the Washington Post are pretty excellent reasons for doing away with billionaires.
And Trump's Joe Rogan interview reminds us that at his core, he's really just a mediocre entertainer.
We'll have all this and more.
This is Brain Trust Live. Hey y'all, I'm Brent.
I'm Lila, and you can find us on the web at www.braintrustlive.com.
9 days until this election.
Voting is upon us.
It's upon us.
If you live in a state that's most of them,
yeah,
you could be voting right now.
You can vote now.
Early voting has really taken off in a great way.
It has.
I feel like every election we get a little closer to what I would say is the goal, which is that here's the thing. I love that California and a lot of the West is mailing us ballots. Yeah. And just making it that easy.
You and I have turned ours in and received a text message from the Secretary of State that our vote has been counted.
It's kind
Wasn't
of
that
nice.
Exciting?
I love when they send you the text message that's like, also, we did count it.
And you and I both got ours the day after putting ours in the box, didn't we?
Yes.
Which was crazy.
They're counting them right away.
They're counting them immediately.
So if you are someone who loves getting a text message from a stranger telling you that your voice was heard,
right.
And are looking for an antidote to all the text messages telling you they need $5.
Right.
It's a highly recommended way to do that. But here's what I miss. I miss getting to be part of the community while voting.
Sure.
I miss helping elderly people wander aimlessly around a room that has no rhyme or reason to how it's set up, that is also being managed by elderly people who don't know how to read the instructions or use iPads.
You missed a deranged Trump voter taking her top off.
That's right.
At a polling place today.
Exactly.
Think of all the excitement that you're missing by voting by mail.
There used to be so much excitement. So I wish that there was a way to combine those two kinds of excitement, the excitement of getting to vote early and the excitement of getting to be in the place. And there actually is, because in-person early voting is a thing almost everywhere.
Right, yeah.
In California, because they proactively mail you the ballot, it doesn't make as much sense.
Sure.
Unless you're like new registering. You can register at early voting and on election day in California. So if you're not registered, you could be.
Right. And if you're a person in California that has received a mail ballot, you have to give it back to them when you go to early vote.
Right. You got to bring your mail ballot.
Yeah, you got to.
Because you can't vote twice. Right. It's a whole thing, and that's why we don't do it. And I love that we've made it so easy, because certainly our ballot doesn't make it easy, because it's the longest fucking ballot in the history of humanity. That is why we're sending voter guides left, right, and center to everyone, and why I send an informal email telling everyone who to actually vote for beyond the props, because who has time?
I know.
It's too hard.
It's too hard.
If you want that email, you can email the podcast, and we'll send it to you if you live in LA. As you may have seen, our prop guide is online. So if you're in the state of California, be out there following our prop guide. We have the right answers to the props, whereas it seems like a lot of Californians don't.
Oh, yeah.
The polling is a mess on that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm going to sort of really dig in, and at some point, either before the election or after all of them fail, write some sort of screed that I will go on about on this podcast.
We're gonna
but because I haven't fully wrapped my brain around it, but it seems like it's not going great.
We've been talking for years about writing something to take down the prop system. Not like us writing a article or a blog post is going to take down the prop system, but we've been talking for years about why the prop system fails us. And I feel like maybe this will be the year that we finally are spurred into action, because it's the polling is a mess on these.
It's not good.
But let's talk a little bit about early voting elsewhere and in the community. Nationwide, because
in exciting places like Delaware.
Exactly. Thrilling locations like the tax haven of Delaware. No, one fun thing about not just Delaware, but other states, including New York and New Jersey, is that a lot of places where early voting has not traditionally been a part of the voting culture are like smashing records for record turnout on the first day of early voting. They don't get, like in California, we have weeks and weeks of early voting.
Right.
In a lot of these states, they have like a week or two of early voting. A lot of it started this weekend.
Yep.
And so people were like in the streets ready to vote the moment voting became available. Yep. And that's very exciting. And I think because of that, you're about to hear a lot of semi-concerned, semi-confused, semi-just looking for excitement stories about what these early voting numbers mean.
Yeah.
Because there has been millions of people have voted nationwide already early, and a lot of them are in battleground states. And in a lot of battleground states, the traditional wisdom has been Democrats need to fucking kill it at early voting in order to have even a shot of winning anything.
Because Republicans are going to catch up on same-day voting.
Because they're same-day voters. There's a few things that I think you should...
Election day voters.
Yeah, election day voters. Right. Everyone's a same-day voter because you can only vote on the day you vote.
You can't vote over the span of multiple days, sadly.
Well, you can in California because it's taken everyone days to fill out their ballot. So in any case... Here's some things to keep in mind about that, because depending on which news source you look at, like Harris holds a lead in early voting in some important states like North Carolina and Arizona and Georgia. Then you look at other news sources. 2 in a row gave me completely contradictory news stories about who does and doesn't have a lead in those states. So I don't know what the truth is. I don't think at this stage it matters because there's been a huge amount of GOP messaging about early voting, encouraging their voters to vote because Democrats knocked it out of the park in 2020.
Yeah, we talked about that on the podcast a couple weeks ago. Like Trump himself has been having campaign events in states that have early voting on the day that early voting started and telling people to go and vote from his rallies. So that's obviously a marked change from 2020.
Yes, and early voting is fairly new. The voting system in general changed a lot because of the pandemic, so things are in flux. But also another thing that we also mentioned in an earlier podcast, but I've just been seeing more and more stories kind of snowball about this, so I figured we would mention it again, is that with these record turnouts for early voting, we don't actually know how we should expect the numbers to fall. Traditionally, because Democrats were hammering early voting hard and Republicans were not, the wisdom has been in a world where early voting is for a shorter period of time and less accessible, and there aren't mail-in ballots and all these other factors that have come into play recently. Yeah. The idea, or the sort of general wisdom was that Democrats lead in early voting, and that's how you figure out what Democratic momentum looks like. There are so many more people voting early than have ever voted in the history of early voting right now that we don't really know who these people are.
No, some of them have to be Republicans, and we know that they are, because in some states where we have those numbers, we know that Republicans are doing early voting. Yeah. But I don't think that's reason to be scared necessarily.
No. And I also will note, there's an increased percentage of the early vote is coming from places that traditionally did not have early voting or accessible early voting. So we're talking about rural counties.
Yeah, that's what I just heard a story specifically. I think it was on NPR the other day about Nevada, because I think more Republicans, I think at this point have turned in their ballots, and I think Democrats are worried about that. There's a close Senate seat there, but it's also when you look sort of specifically and get into it really in a granular way, you can see that it's Republicans who have returned their ballots in rural areas. They're older voters, which is why they're returning their ballots, because they probably are used to doing absentee and stuff. And the main population center is in Las Vegas. Those people are just going to roll up to a polling place on the day. It's you have to look at each of these places with a different eye. There's not really one narrative that you can sort of form by all of the early voting that has happened.
Well, and some of these, North Carolina, more than a quarter of the registered voters in the state have already voted.
Obviously, that's a lot of Republicans.
Right.
And that's fine. They can't vote again on election day.
Exactly.
So it's don't panic that they voted already. That's fine. They were going to vote.
A bunch of counties in Georgia have already passed the 50% threshold for likely voters.
Right.
So 3 million people have voted in Georgia right now. I think in Michigan, Saturday was their first day of early voting. They had a wild turnout, something almost 150,000 people voted, but also 1.4 million people had already voted by mail there.
Right.
These states aren't that big, also. You live in California, you're who cares about 1.4 million voters? So that's more people in Michigan than it is in California, where 3.7 million people have already voted. Wisconsin had a 40% increase in early voting compared to 2020. These are all massive numbers compared to what we're used to seeing. And early voting has just begun on this Saturday in a lot of places. So expect to see a lot of news stories speculating about this, and just don't get too worried about it. Well, and worry if you want about other things, but not this.
And I also think that there has to be part of why this is, we joke about it, and we've joked about it on this podcast, but I have talked to so many people who have voted already. And I feel there's a real consensus of people where it's just this is the most annoying election / time of my entire existence on this earth.
Yes.
I need to just freaking be done with this.
Yes.
And I think a lot of the early voting is due to that sentiment also.
Totally, I agree. No, I think everyone is just get this over with.
Right.
And a nice thing about early voting, sometimes and in some places it stops some of the texts and emails. Not all of them. Don't get too excited. You're not going to get off Dan Osborne's list just because of whatever. But like, John Tester, who's been emailing me in the middle of the night saying he can't sleep, and then the first line of the email is just, "I'm a poor dirt farmer from my." It's what is a dirt farmer? I still don't know. Aren't all farmers dirt farmers? Farming involves the dirt. It's the land. Anyway, but I feel like also once you get it out of your hair, you can move on to making other contributions if you are still nervous.
Sure.
You can make calls, you can knock doors, you can do all the stuff that people do in order to do like last minute get out the vote. This is the kind of election where like last minute get out the vote is kind of important because especially in a place like California where filling out your ballot is so fucking hard, but everyone has one in their home, you can go knock doors and like help people fill out their ballots, basically.
Yep.
And like stuff like that is, I think, worth thinking about if you want this out of your hair, but you want to feel like you're doing something. I just like, don't become a person whose only sort of point of connection to this election is watching terrifying news stories about how the early vote totals are favoring Republicans.
Right. Or about how there's Nazi rallies going on.
Or about how there's Nazi rallies happening at Madison Square Garden. Although, I would note that one unforeseen consequence of the Nazi rally that happened at Madison Square Garden was that my father tragically was blocked from going to his bagel place this morning and getting a bagel because almost all of Herald Square is closed. And I would just like to point out that whatever was said at that rally about Donald Trump being a New Yorker, Brent heard a quote from a woman from New Jersey who said that Donald Trump is New York. No self-respecting New Yorker would be blocking actual New Yorkers from their bagel place. Especially because that bagel place is blocks from Madison Square Garden. It is not like he went to a bagel place inside of Penn Station or something. Right. He was going as a bagel place on an entirely different avenue. So that, if more than anything else, should let you know what the level of respect for New Yorkers themselves was at this rally. There was also a level of disrespect geared at almost everyone else. So in that sense, it was a Nazi rally. What are you going to, it's for Nazis. So, they were rude at it.
Like to the point where one of the speakers there is Jewish. And he said that he was at a Nazi rally.
Yeah.
Where's this quote?
So I just got back from Israel and they go, "Sid, you really want to speak at this Madison Square Garden thing?" I go, "Sure. Out of character for me to speak at a Nazi rally. I was just in Israel, but I took the gig." That's Sid Rosenberg, who's a radio host. He called Doug Emhoff a crappy Jew at the rally as well. That's the quality of person and commentary that was going on there.
They had 30 people speak before Trump.
Guys. And some of those speakers are people that I think should wonder if they wanted to be remembered in this historical moment in this way. Like,
sure.
Was RFK there? Sure. Should he have been? No. He should not have been.
Melania was there?
Melania was there, of all people.
Elon
was there. Obviously. First of all, stop giving Rudy Giuliani speaking slots. He no longer is a credible speaking source. I know that at one time he was like a media maven. Right. I lived in his New York at that time.
And a New Yorker, I was going to say. Right.
Yeah. I know the time. If there is anyone besides Donald Trump that New Yorkers would like to rid themselves of as a reputational casualty of this moment, it's Rudy Giuliani. We've disbarred him, and we're not the only people who've disbarred him, but like, get that guy out of here.
Right.
He no longer speaks for New Yorkers.
Notable people who were not there were any single Republicans in a close congressional race in and around New York.
I'm shocked to hear about that. You mean Mark Molinaro did not make an appearance there?
No, but there were a lot of other insane people. One of them, a air quote comedian.
He certainly...
Tony Hinchcliffe.
Felt he was making jokes.
Who was the first of the speakers.
And he really came in hot to the extent that the moment he hit the screen, Twitter blew up.
Oh, yeah. He had some doozies. Racist doozies. Where he said...
And you know what? That should go without... Anytime that we are describing a doozy related to from this Nazi rally, it should be going without... It should go without saying that it's a racist doozy.
Yeah, exactly. He said, these Latinos, they love making babies, too. Just know that they do. There's no pulling out. They don't do that. They come inside just like they did our country.
I mean, this is...
It's comedy.
What they feel about Latino voters, by the way. Like,
I know.
Who they are polling better with than they should be.
That's what I was going to say. It's just like, some of these choices are like, besides being obviously blatantly racist.
Right. Are just politically sort of like dumb.
Politically like, very questionable.
Very.
When it's like you're out here trying to claim, because they're also, like, supposedly anyway doing better with black people. Although there's recent polling that I think is showing
that's
both
not.
of those things not happening,
Yes.
both black and Latino people. So maybe that's why they decided to just go all in on the racism today.
Suspected as much. When that polling first came out, I was like, maybe this is like a minor blip in the polling.
Sure.
But there's no way they hold it together.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah, I think there was a very recent, maybe it was either yesterday or today or something, that was like talking about like how she's really sort of like running up those numbers with Latinos.
Yeah,
and black people.
It doesn't make sense when the other party is saying shit like this.
Right, because he also said, he pointed to some black guy in the audience. He said, oh, that's cool, a black guy with a thing on his head. What the hell is that? A lampshade? I'm kidding. That's one of my buddies. He had a Halloween party last night. We had fun. We carved watermelons together.
Like, first of all, don't be within visual distance of the stage at a Nazi rally if you are not like a white man who blends into the wall.
I mean, hello.
I mean, like, stay safe out there, people.
I know.
If you're a Trump voter or not, that's you know what, you do you. I can't control how you feel you need to vote. Mm-mm. I just want everyone to be thinking about how they can stay safe in this environment, and that's not how.
No, it's not.
They also obviously took on Puerto Rico. They're very mad at Puerto Rico because Puerto Rico's mad at them.
Sure.
He said, there's a lot going on. I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. I think it's called Puerto Rico. Now, everyone has had to come out and talk about how much they love Puerto Rico.
Including Rick Scott.
Rick Scott, famous non-Puerto Rico relevant person. Bad Bunny just endorsed Kamala Harris over this comment.
Right.
And so, I know that the like momentum of like culture is not with them anyway. But, like, don't invite all this.
No, I know.
This is crazy.
There was also some guy there who is a Queens resident who's like his name's David Rem. He's like a 60-year-old sanitation worker, and he's like billing himself and being billed as Trump's lifelong friend. But there's this very weird backstory about how they actually only met 2 weeks ago. but Trump is like trotting him out to events lately. Anyway, he gesticulated with a crucifix. He was holding a crucifix.
Sure.
And he was like
Christianity.
Totally manic. And he told the crowd, he said, "The cross that I'm holding is the cross that my mother used to hold in the air when she prayed at night, every night for Donald Trump and his family, because we knew 3 years ago that his life was going to be attempted to kill."
Oh.
Because they don't want Donald Trump at the ballot box. So 3 years ago, his clairvoyant mother
has been praying for Donald Trump for 3 years.
With the very crucifix that he was waving wildly at this Trump rally.
I feel like it's an important moment to point out that the attempted assassin of Donald Trump was a registered Republican.
Right.
Most recently.
Yeah.
A few journalists have also been pointing that out on Twitter because literally everyone talked about them trying to kill Donald Trump. Yeah. And I want to know, the call is coming from inside the House in this situation because them is a registered Republican. Yeah. That's who them is.
Yeah. Well, have you seen the latest Twitter conspiracy theory about a conspiracy theory? I love it when conspiracy theories get meta. But, there was all of the, there was some level of conspiracy theory saying that Trump assassination attempt was planned.
Of course.
Right?
There's been a conspiracy theory about both of them.
So then we had, this week, there was the whole situation online where there was the supposed October surprise.
Right.
Remember where wasn't it Mark Halperin was like, "I've seen this reporting, I don't believe it, and it's being shopped around town, blah blah blah," and everybody was like, "Oh, it's about this video of Trump groping some underage woman at a rally." Well, more recently, there are now journalists, air quote journalists,
there are a number
on
of journalists
Twitter who are saying what that story is actually.
Is that he planned the assassination attempt?
Is like some level of proof of the assassination attempt, and no media outlet wants to touch it because it's too toxic.
Well, the entire thing is toxic right now because media outlets aren't even willing to touch a presidential endorsement, a thing that media outlets famously do.
So take that information with, for what it's worth.
I am choosing to believe that's 100% true.
So am I. It makes sense.
Well, first of all, nobody cares about another story about Donald Trump groping somebody.
Right.
How's that going to be news? Right.
And of course, CNN isn't going to take a story about that assassination attempt being 9 days away from the election. They're going to report on a faked assassination attempt. That's not going to happen.
No.
So it makes sense that could be what it, and I'm not saying it's true, but I could believe that is what the story that was being offered to the outlets was.
Like, here's what this feels like. This feels like an opportunity for the internet to spontaneously produce this information.
Oh, yeah.
We live on the
Let's have
internet.
it.
You guys, we don't need the Washington Post to report this story.
Right. And sir, we'll be
And
talking about them in a few minutes, and they won't be.
But I mean, like, this is not, you don't, once we have a story, and you're a journalist and you can report the story.
Yeah, even if the story is fake, just put it on Twitter.
Put it on Twitter. We spent a full month talking about J.D. Vance fucking couches.
Right.
Because someone put something funny on Twitter. Let us at least speculate about it.
Right.
If we had to have...
If Twitter isn't for gossip, then what's it for?
So if we had to have that dumb Comey situation before 2016, we didn't ask for that.
The reason why Hillary Clinton lost,
yes,
by the way.
Course.
Did you see that this
yes.
week? We're going on some tangents
guys,
here, but it's our podcast, so shut up.
Yeah. But I mean, like, let us... we no longer are beholden to the printing press gods because we invented a spontaneous printing press that we can just speak this into existence.
Jake Tapper. I mean,
no, exactly. We don't need CNN to tell us that Donald Trump. First of all, nobody needs anyone to tell them Donald Trump faked his assassination attempts. That's something we can all feel in our hearts. But even if you need the proof, if you have the proof, just share the proof.
Right.
You don't need the sign off of Jeff Bezos to share the proof.
No.
We invented the internet for this exact moment. Slap up a website.
Yeah.
Call it a day.
Yeah.
You know, learn some I don't know what kind of code there is out there. HTML, is that a code?
I think so.
Put it on a website is my point. Buy a domain name, put it on a website.
Yeah. We have a website, guys.
We don't know anything.
To this day, 12 years later, I don't know how it got there.
No, I worked very hard on it, but I had to learn to build a website by myself through the ether.
Yeah.
I made it up.
And you really should be proud of yourself for that.
I am. If you're wondering why it doesn't get updated very much, it's because we don't know how. But even we have a website. So it's like, it's time to get out there.
Yeah, put it on a Substack if you're looking for money for it. Make people pay for it. I'd pay for it.
Here's the thing. I am trying to figure out in this context what an October surprise could even be. First of all, we're running out of October.
Well, that's what I know. In that quote, it was just sort of like, it would change everything. And it's like, the fuck it would.
Right. Nothing changes everything. Don't worry about that. This is a man who came into sort of our internet by saying he was going to grab women by the pussy. Yeah. Like, don't worry about how this is going to change the race. He's doing enough to change the race just by being...
He just had a Nazi rally.
He just had a Nazi rally in Madison Square Garden, and his previous rally, they involved him pacing the stage silently for 20 minutes. There was one where he danced for 45 minutes because he couldn't think of what to say. He's saying increasingly unhinged shit at all of these things. Yep. None of it makes any sense. So, like, don't worry so much. Anyway, he's been calling Kamala Harris both the devil and the Antichrist.
Oh, though that was that crazy 6-year-old. That was the crucifix
David
wielding
Rem
person.
called him that.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, yeah. I missed that.
Yeah, my bad.
Well, it's the notes. What are you going to do?
They're my bad notes. Sorry.
Well, what are you going to do?
But he could say that, and probably might.
I'm sure
so
he's...
whatever.
She called him a fascist this week.
Why am I correcting you?
We got to use words,
Who cares?
A lot of pathetic members of Congress.
Oh, God, I know. Mike Johnson, Elise Stefanik,
Byron
Donalds. Just the
loseriest
dregs
people.
Of humanity.
Literal dregs of humanity. God. I'm still so fascinated about what happened to Elise Stefanik.
Oh, I know.
Did she have, like... Remember the time we went to the very first Politicon, and Michelle Bachmann told us the story of how she became a Republican, and it was a story about her being a Democrat and reading the book Burr by Gore Vidal on a New York City bus or something like that.
Yeah.
And somehow that turned her into a Republican. I feel like what was fascinating about Michelle Bachmann was that she had tried. She had read the books and she had done the stuff and studied the history, and it was like her brain could not like form the logical next step of every fact that she learned. Like they just couldn't she couldn't construct a logical narrative out of these facts. And there
were too many misfires going on.
So many misfires. Yeah. And so she had done the work of gathering the facts. And it was like her own brain worked against her in this situation. And I started to feel like, okay, she's a victim of bad brainitude, and I can't do anything about that. Nope. We're not going to fix it, because if you can give her the correct information, she's not able to take it and form correct thoughts from that correct information. Is that what happened to Elise Stefanik?
I think it must have been.
Because something misfired at some point, and she has lost her way.
Yeah.
In a
deep way.
Deep way.
Yeah.
And she's only gotten deeper and deeper and deeper. But she used to be a very moderate member of Congress.
Yeah.
And listen, was she ever my cup of tea? No. She's nobody's cup of tea.
No.
But that notwithstanding, she was just like a moderate Republican from upstate New York in the middle of the Trump era. She was one of those do-nothing caucus people in Congress. She was working across the aisle to accomplish next to nothing, to stall legislation on both sides. And then somehow, like, took a turn somewhere along the way and landed herself at a Nazi rally. And I just don't understand where this transition occurred.
I
can see how Mike Johnson got here. He's a grifter.
Well, oh, for sure.
You know, that guy's... Byron Donald, he doesn't know what's... He's a grifter, but he's also kind of, like, just happy to be invited along.
Totally.
But, like, the Elise Stefanik thing is a fascinating twist.
I don't know.
Anyway, so once you made it through the 30 speakers who had to speak before Trump, Trump himself had to pause his speech at various moments so that the audience could be directed to the Jumbotron so that we could watch news clips of crimes committed by immigrants.
I'm sorry. I'm laughing. It's not funny.
They needed something to break up his speech because it seems, according to my parents' review, they watched the entire thing.
I know.
They're heroes, but they're also crazy. Why would you do that? But they were mad about they had to walk out of their way this morning and then they couldn't get bagels. It was a trying day for them. I feel like because Donald Trump has been told to stay on message, probably, he starts his speech on message. Every speech starts with a prompter speech.
It always happens. It happened at the debate, too,
right? It happens everywhere.
Like, oh, God, he's going to sound reasonable tonight.
And then it's like, no such luck. And then he kind of, it's like his own brain does like some freewheeling connections and he kind of like lands where he lands.
Right. He does the weave.
Oh, he can't help but do the weave.
He connects all the dots.
Some of the dots are not necessarily in the line of dots that he was working with in the first place. He's connecting various dots.
Yeah.
It's not all the dots, it's various dots. And I think that if they don't play videos interspersed in his speech or have props, there's no way to reel him back in when he gets lost.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's what that's about.
Yeah, it's like their version of just like playing him off.
Yes, exactly.
Except they're not fully playing him off.
No, they're just playing him to a new track.
Right. As soon as the brains, as soon as he starts talking about being electrocuted by sharks or whatever it is, then it's like, put on the clip of the immigrant killing somebody.
Right. And then it's like, then he can reset and like, I don't know, talk about windmills or whatever. But like, it kind of gives him a chance to reset in between like wild tangents.
Right.
Because they do that with props too. Remember where he at the RNC, he had to hug and kiss that fireman's jacket or whatever.
That's right. Right.
They also, because then he did that for a while and then it was kind of like, okay, well now we need to move on because we've already kissed the fireman's jacket. So it's like now new topic. So that's what's going on in Republican world, Nazi rallies.
Right.
In Democrat world, Kamala Harris has been traveling to states you might expect and then to some unexpected ones like Texas.
Sure.
She did a CNN town hall.
Yeah. And I want to be clear because I'm going to go on a rage about her town hall appearance.
You have to.
And some of her other appearances. I don't want it to seem like we're putting this story where I'm mad at Kamala Harris after Trump's Nazi rally to both sides these two things.
No.
Like, that's not the intention here. We're just...
Listen.
It's the flow of the news
right.
this week.
There is no world in which sounding like a moderate Republican is the equivalent of hosting a Nazi rally.
That's right.
And we know that.
We do know that.
We are progressives.
It doesn't make me less annoyed with her.
We don't, right.
Specifically, though.
Right. But that is not a reflection of our thoughts of a literal Nazi rally that's occurring at Madison Square Garden tonight.
That's still bad.
That's much worse than whatever Kamala Harris is saying or not saying at these press appearances.
Well, she's not saying a lot of things, and she's also saying too many things.
Well,
she's back to her old tricks.
Yeah, she certainly is.
And it's weird because, like, I feel like as recently as, like, literally last week, she was being applauded for being short and concise. Remember that Charlemagne the God interview where, like, she had, like, a lot of, like, quippy interviews where I think even he was surprised at sort of, like, her unwillingness to sort of, like, talk about the meaning of time.
Right.
You know? And I was happy about that because I was like, oh, well, this is... And she even joked at one point about, like, that was her just staying on message. And it's like, good, just do that for the next 11 days. But a town hall...
I have been clear that she has an expiration date when it comes to her ability to stay on message.
Oh, it ended.
It has
been met.
It expired. So that was
I'm telling you, I
she,
said it.
You know what? She got it right up to the election, though.
She did. Well, I don't know.
As close as she could get it.
I remember a couple weeks ago suggesting on this podcast that my suggestion to the Harris campaign would be to find the bunker.
Yes.
Get in the bunker.
I do feel like this was the week where I was like,
it's bunker time. It's bunker time.
Get some surrogates out there.
Yeah.
Put Pete Buttigieg on the road.
Totally.
He's been yucking it up on late night, doing whatever he does.
Get Hillary Clinton off the road.
Do not put her back on the road.
Take her to the bunker with you.
This is a time to share a bunker with her.
Hillary Clinton and Liz Cheney. Think of how fun Hillary Clinton and Liz Cheney and Kamala Harris could all have in the bunker together.
I will say, Hillary Clinton's delightful in person. They probably have a great... I don't know what Liz Cheney's like, a bit psychotic probably,
but I bet her and Hillary Clinton have a lot of common.
I was gonna say, I bet that they're old friends. So yeah, there's a bunch of people I would take to that bunker. I would really only rely on slick messengers at this stage in the race, but. I don't, the Houston rally, I think it was good that she was able to do that because she finally got payoff on this Beyonce sort of tepid support she's been getting. I feel like that was important for the pop culture of this moment.
Yep.
I feel like I was okay with her attending that event because of that. I was like, send her to fun events.
Right.
Where she can like dance on stage and just can deliver a stump speech and doesn't have to answer any questions. It's time to reel it in on the town halls. Donald Trump's not doing them.
Well, no, I know.
So who cares?
And I think that's why she maybe thought that it was a good idea. And she did, I think, maybe like get a moment of being like, I'm the only one taking real questions. But it's also like, well, you're the only one giving shit answers to the real questions.
Also, though, to be fair, not one person in America really watched this town hall.
No, that's probably true.
And it's because it was boring. So,
well, she was giving she gave multiple answers that were longer than 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's too long.
5 minutes.
She's not a concise lady, Brent. That's not.
Damn, girl.
That's maybe the strategy was to bore everyone to turning off the TV so that she would get credit for doing the town hall. So she could be like, I answer questions.
No, I think that's exactly what she did.
And then nobody would watch. Yeah.
I think that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which maybe was a genius strategy. I don't know.
Right.
I'm sorry that someone listened till the end.
I know.
I certainly didn't.
I know. I was about to read a bunch of quotes of hers, but I almost don't even really care.
Let's talk about the gist of the quotes.
Okay, great.
The gist of the quotes is that she kind of claimed that voters don't care that much about Gaza because they want to afford groceries. That was, I think, listen, I have sort of been screaming this exact point to my mother on the phone every day this week, only because I'm sick of people pretending the economy is great and that we should be proud of the economy
right.
and that the real issue is Gaza. Like, I was finally like, Mom, I don't actually think a lot of voters that they're currently messaging to care as much about Gaza as the cost of groceries. I just wouldn't say that.
That's what I was going to say. It felt like...
I get why you might think it. I think it. It's too bad because I think we should probably care the most about genocide. But that notwithstanding, I also recognize that a lot of voters are not engaged in this issue the way that those of us who, especially those of us who have had the Middle East have this grip on our politics, our local politics for such a long time. Like New Yorkers, for New Yorkers, the Middle East sort of looms really large because it affects our local politics so much. I think that same is true in LA and a lot of, whatever. I'm sure that in a lot of places that aren't Michigan, that, I bet that Georgia voters aren't that engaged.
I agree.
That said,
you don't go.
You can't use your words to say it.
Right, exactly. That said, you don't say that the handoff for burning babies is having cheap groceries.
That's
which,
right.
by the way, we don't.
I was going to say, now we don't get either of them. Because it's like a delusional message about the economy.
Yeah.
And also about Gaza.
Right.
And I want at least one of those solved.
Right.
But anyway, the main gist of the night, before I went on that tangent that I was about to say, is that there was a lot of Trump would be worse.
Right. Which listen, of course she's going to do that, and that
messaging.
That's right. It's right. Yeah. The New York Times, and I think that this is interesting, and they're idiots over there. Let's be honest. We don't need to explain
our national
to
papers
you
are failing us right now.
They're failing us. But I do wonder if this is is this what Democrats think progressives want? Because I'm going to read you exactly what the New York Times said. They said, in regard to her saying Trump would be far worse, basically in response to like every answer, they said, this is the quote, "It was a strategy aimed at traditional Democrats who might be wavering on her, such as progressives who are unhappy with American support or for Israel or Jewish voters worried that Harris wouldn't be supportive enough." So that was sort of in specific in regard to what's going on in the Middle East. But
for many people who care about this issue, they also care about bringing down the price of groceries.
Right. But the idea that it would be progressives specifically who would be the ones who would react to her messaging about Trump being worse. That's not what progressives are looking for.
No, progressives want a plan.
Progressives want you to tell them what you're going to do.
Exactly.
Not be like, well, Trump is bad.
No.
It's literally, we want the exact opposite of what the New York Times thinks that we want. And I'm wondering if that is a Democratic-wide problem. Do they really not get it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
That great. You know the answer to that. Biden's
right. Why am I so alarmed by this?
Biden's entire campaign was premised on this exact misunderstanding, where it was like, why could anyone want it? What was the appeal of Bernie Sanders? To them, it was just like people love free stuff. No, Bernie Sanders was laying out like a vision that involved sort of and progressives. What progressives don't care about is the details of your plan.
No.
They moderate Democrats misunderstand this piece all the time.
Right.
Where they're like, well, it's not possible to do in this current situation in the next 4 years, so I guess I can't message on it.
I don't need a spreadsheet. In fact, I
don't want to look at one.
Notably don't want one.
I've never wanted to look at a spreadsheet one time in my life. I want to know that you share similar goals to me, and so I want to know where the plan's heading.
That's right.
And this is the opposite.
Somebody with a
of
law degree can write it up for us later.
We hire people to do this exact job. This is why I get so nuts when we have to call our senators in California to tell them about basic things like we want gun control. Remember how we were having to call Dianne Feinstein?
Yes.
Who is literally the person who wrote the assault weapons ban to be like, yes, we still want gun control in California. Because she was like, well, I'm not hearing about anything. Like, every time that there was an issue that was like an obvious, we don't want Jeff Sessions to be the attorney general. Right. I'm not hearing about it from my constituents. You shouldn't have to. We're paying a staff to tell you this information. I shouldn't have to call you. I have shit to do.
I know.
So I feel like this... The Trump would be worse messaging is holdover messaging. That was the whole Biden campaign.
Yeah.
Was just Trump would be worse. And the reason that he was not catching on and his polling was underwater was because no one had any fucking clue that he planned to do anything.
Right.
That he was just like, well, things could be worse. It's like, well, don't threaten me.
Right. I know. Totally. Yeah. The other thing, and then we'll leave this, because to your point, no one watched it or cared.
No.
But like, this is another thing that annoyed me, because she's got a new answer now for why she's been flip-flopping on a bunch of stuff from her 2019 campaign, and I would contend that it's a worse one. Because she said, our country deserves to have a president in the United States who is not afraid of good ideas and does not stand on pride. I'm never going to shy away from good ideas, and I'm not going to feel the need to have pride associated with a position that I've taken, when the important thing is to build consensus to fix problems. Now, a lot of those things I very much support. You and I on this podcast quite often say...
We love it when politicians admit that they're wrong and do the right thing.
Right, and also, like, let anyone have a good idea.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Another thing that we love to say over the years
right, if Mike Lee has a good idea because he wants to end the war in Yemen, let him do it.
God bless him.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Don't fight him about it. But the bit that I take issue with here is when she said, I'm not going to have pride associated with a position that I've taken. Essentially being like, well, if I had bad ideas in the past, then it's fine that I abandon them.
Right.
But the ideas that she had in the past was a ban on fracking. It was Medicare for all.
They were good ideas.
They were good fucking ideas. And those are the things that people are curious about why she's flip-flopped.
Yeah.
And she's out here being like, well, they were shit, so now I have different ideas.
It does misunderstand what people like. She's talking about abandoning ideas that poll at like 1 billion%.
Right, that's exactly right.
And so it does. It's like a clever framing if you don't pay attention to what the ideas are.
Right.
It's not like it's a bad framing just from like broad political messaging standpoints, but like it is a bad idea if you have like put any thought into which ideas she's calling bad.
Right.
Because they are ideas that almost everyone universally thinks are good.
That's right. Yeah.
And I also feel like they are like the secret figuring out how to reframe those ideas so that you can, I have always said, I've just started 3 different points at once.
You're doing the weave.
I'm doing the weave. I have always said, you don't have to advocate for all the good ideas at once. I know that there are lobbies that make that too complicated to do. If you can put
she's taking money from
everyone. And they have $1 billion. You have enough money now. Say whatever you want. Anyway, I also feel like the one way that you can kind of get yourself out of the quandary of having to say this is to advocate for one good idea that is unpopular with corporate America. Pick the industry you want to piss off.
Sure.
And tell Big Pharma to fuck off, because that's the one I would pick.
Sure.
But I mean, like, pick the industry that you want to protect Americans from.
Yeah.
So that you can be like, whenever this point comes up, you can be like, I don't back down on my ideas. It's incredibly unpopular with our donors and with, the corporate overlords that control our country, that I want to regulate the price of prescription drugs.
Right.
But I'm going to do that for you because it's that important. I care about representing my voters. I care about, that is a value of mine because I care about people's lives.
Yep.
I feel like what she has not done here in this answer is give us an argument for what she will fight for that is sort of like, because we all know what the code is here. Like, we all know it's like good ideas are ideas people like, and bad ideas, bad ideas are ideas people like, good ideas are ideas that donors in corporate America like. Everyone gets what the kind of like meaning is here.
Sure.
I feel like what you have to do is actually deflect by having one good idea that you hold on to.
Sure.
I've been saying that because, you're taking money from everyone. I get it. Pick a line, though. If your line in the sand is like, I'm not going to take money from the medical insurance industry or whatever it is, and like that's the one. Yep. And I'm going to make sure that Americans who are losing their lives because of unethical practices, whatever it is, like that's the one I'm going to draw a line on. And then whenever you get this question, you're like, I don't abandon my principles. I told you in 2019 that I would fight to make sure prescription drugs were affordable, and here's what I'm doing now. Whatever it is. That's how you actually reframe that point, I feel like.
Yeah, I think you're right.
You have to give people one example of a time of the good idea that you're going to hold on to that they support. Because right now she can't name an idea that's actually polling well that is one of the good ideas.
Right. Well, and also she is afraid of some of her old positions. And that, I think, is sort of troubling to people because, the other thing that she sort of has gotten herself into trouble with certain parts of at least my internet is that she sort of seemed to be slow walking back some support for trans rights this week because she's obviously getting hammered on that. And I think a lot of people would have liked her to have maybe had a little bit more of a stronger answer when she got asked about it. And she said, I think that we should just follow the law.
Yeah. And this is another example of the kind of issue that a Tim Walz approach could actually like teach us something. Because you could just be like, I don't care about this. People should do whatever they want.
Sure.
I'm not in people's business.
Right.
That's not my responsibility.
Yep.
People should do whatever makes them happy. As long as it doesn't hurt anyone, I don't care.
Yep.
I'm just here to support people flourishing.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that the messaging that he has on a lot of those issues is very much like, I don't care. Do you?
Right.
And that, it feels like, is actually what people want from this conversation.
Sure.
At least voters that might consider voting for Kamala Harris. Because ultimately, it's like with abortion, it's like with any of these issues. What we actually need is someone to remind us that they don't fucking matter on the political level. They only matter when you're hurting people.
Yeah, right.
When people have the right to do what they want to do, they don't matter. Who fucking cares if other people are getting abortions? Mind your business. Don't get one if you don't think abortions are a good idea. Like, don't change your gender if you don't like trans people. Don't get gay married if you don't approve of gay. I mean, like, you just don't have to do any of these things. And because of that, I feel like these messaging quandaries are so easy to get out of by just being like, let's be reasonable, you guys.
Right.
Do you actually care?
I know. But this is why...
But this is...
She needs to go back into the bunker.
She's losing her... Yeah, she was actually kind of on that train for a while, and then she kind of lost her way. She only has 3 months in her of, like, competent political campaigning.
Right.
I don't think she was a bad senator. I think she's been a good vice president. I think she'll be a great president.
That's what I was about to say.
This is not even about her ability to serve in office with these. She is a shitty campaigner. She has great instincts, and she lets everyone walk all over her. Hillary Clinton does not have great instincts. So I do think that that's like, when Harris became the candidate, I was like, okay, we know she has a month of good instincts in her before consultants come in and ruin everything. So I was happy with that choice. I think a lot of people only have a month of good ideas in them. or good instincts in them.
Oh, that's fair.
Right? Some people have way less than that. Like I said, Hillary Clinton has 0 months of good instincts in her.
Right.
But like, I was like, we are lucky because we only have to ride this out for a few months.
Right.
We only gave her a 3-month runway. She should not have more than a 3-month runway, but she only has 3 months in her. So I'm not surprised that things are falling apart. Anyway, but she did get Beyonce to come to a rally.
She did, but she didn't get her to sing, though.
No, it's like, whatever. They were going to play her on with a Beyonce song. They played her off. Kelly Rowland spoke. I mean, it was like the whole Beyonce family spoke. The Knowles family was there, and Willie Nelson was there for some reason.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was in Texas, so he had to be.
Where's Michelle?
I know, Michelle Williams. How come she didn't get to...
I have a theory.
Oh.
I feel like she has been mostly working in, like, gospel-y settings.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like maybe...
Probably not necessarily voting for Trump.
I don't think she's voting for Trump. I just feel like it might not be a good look for her career to show up at a Harris rally.
I get it. Mm-hmm.
Just, she's on the gospel. You gotta...
Just would have been nice to have all of Destiny's Children there.
I know.
Yeah. But Silky Nutmeg Ganache was there. Do you know who that is? Probably not.
Of course not.
That's the Reverend Dr. Silky Nutmeg Ganache. She's a drag queen from RuPaul's Drag Race.
Oh, she's I was like, large. I hope we're talking about a drag queen.
She's a large drag queen.
All right, well, Silky Nutmeg Ganache.
And she was doing a lot of work in the stands, dancing to whatever it was that was being played.
You love to hear it. You just love to hear it.
And there's clips aplenty on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I recommend it.
That's right.
So we do a little Twitter search for you. There.
Yeah, at least we finally got some payoff on the Beyonce rumors that have been circulating this whole time. I feel like it would have been such a bad look if Beyonce never showed up.
I know.
And I get it. She's busy and probably doesn't want to be involved.
Right.
She's got enough jobs. But,
Yeah.
You have to do something. Especially in light of the fact that media more broadly is failing us at every turn. Because both the LA Times and Washington Post, two papers owned by billionaires, said that they will not be endorsing for president in this year's elections.
Wild.
What the fuck?
It's crazy. Because I feel like...
pretend to do journalism at least.
That's what I was going to say. It's like... you really, in this election specifically... And listen, the daughter of the LA Times owner floated that it was because
because
Gaza. And then I was like, well, that's at least a reason. I mean, whether you agree with it or not.
Right.
But
then he was like, never.
The next day he was like, no, that's not
was like,
the reason. Because then he said something about like adding to the political division or something like that. It's like, to our point about earlier in this podcast, we have one candidate doing a Nazi rally.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And people joking about it being a Nazi rally.
Right. At the rally, not just us joking about it being a Nazi rally.
Yeah. So, like, you're really just showing your whole ass.
Yes.
In this. And there's already reports of quid pro quo going on with at least Bezos specifically.
Of course there is.
Trump.
Because,
so
and the editors are resigning over this. I mean, like, the staff is very unhappy. And also, did you see the Washington Post news article about how they weren't going to endorse? They found a way to pull in every quote from former editors, from journalists about how cowardly a move it was.
Oh, shit.
Like, it's a scathing article that's theoretically just them reporting the news of how they're not going to report the news.
Yeah.
But it's like they found a way to make clear that the staff was very deeply unhappy about this because this is a dereliction of duty.
It is. But it's also like, it's one of those things where it's like, I saw something where, somebody's tracking like how many subscribers that the Washington Post has lost. Like,
it's bad business.
It's bad business, but it's also just like, it's bad, like, we should want good journalism going on here. And
that is something they have traditionally provided at the Washington Post, more or less.
More or less.
In history.
At least in terms of like, giving us some level of like fact-based information to digest.
Also, they have some investigative reporters, whereas a lot of outlets right now don't have any.
And we always knew that, Bezos purchasing them was going to be bad.
Yeah.
But like, I think it's just, it's bad in ways that are really, I think, nefarious, actually. Just because it's like, and that actually, I got to thinking about this because like, I haven't really been trying to think of reasons why to vote for Kamala Harris because I don't care. Sorry about it. I live in California.
I've made him think about this because we've had some exchanges with people who wanted to hear his point of view because I had just been like, well, I'm voting for her, so do whatever you want.
Yeah. And I think that as I was thinking about, and this isn't to say that like Kamala Harris doesn't have her own billionaire donors,
right?
Because she does. But I feel like
this is a California conversation.
I was going to
say,
if
you're in Wisconsin,
exactly.
Ignore this part of the conversation.
Sure.
Anyway, continue.
But I feel like if someone were going to hold a gun to my head and say, what is the reason, other than not being Donald Trump,
right,
that you would tell me to convince me to vote for Harris, I might actually have it be to not be letting our nation's worst billionaires pick who the president is.
Yeah. I feel like there are the Trump movement, MAGA and Trump himself are so nefarious that it's really those reasons that are the compelling reasons. Like, are you going to get mediocre leadership from crappy Democrats who don't do shit? Yes.
Forever until the end of time.
Are corporate overlords going to control everything that we do? Always.
Yeah.
There is a level of that control, though, that is actually, like, unacceptable and makes it impossible for us to continue the lives that we would like to live, just minding our business.
Yeah.
And that's what we don't want.
Right, exactly. Like, vote for Kamala Harris to pull one over on Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk.
Right, like
there.
Yeah, like that. It's like it's a harm reduction vote. I get that. Not everybody wants to have a harm reduction vote be their only option to contribute to the to society. Like all of that, I get. But like, there is a difference between these billionaires picking the president and our shitty billionaires picking the president.
Sure.
And they're all billionaires, and they shouldn't exist.
I was just about to say, we should note that
we should note that billionaires shouldn't exist. We should proceed as if they don't.
Yeah.
Because if we've learned anything from MMT, we could just proceed as if they don't. But the point is that the problem, the reason billionaires are bad is because it buys you political speech. It's not, as part of our MMT education, we learned that the main problem with billionaires is not really that they have so much money so they can buy like a lot of, I don't know, comic books. It's that it buys them political speech. It buys them leverage.
Leverage,
and to have unchecked power via being a billionaire is a problematic thing for our stability.
Right. This
is why.
Right. This story right here is a good reason as to why they should not exist.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Because one man who owns Amazon should not also own the Washington Post, which is a paper of record in this nation's capital.
And telling the editors of that paper that they can't endorse the person who's not the Nazi.
Exactly. And what is the LA Times playing at here? Who's the constituency for the LA Times that's like, I would rather no one be endorsed in this paper?
No, none.
Like,
yeah,
in LA?
They're going to lose a ton of readers, too.
They already have lost a ton of readers because they do shitty reporting now because this guy doesn't want them to be a meaningful, news player.
Right.
But, like, this is dumb, is my point.
Yeah. Speaking of dumb.
A perfect segue.
We're back to Trump now.
That's right.
And I did not listen to this because I think it's something like 3 hours, but Trump was on Joe Rogan, and I'm not going to listen to it, but there were some good clips that came out of this.
That's right.
That were comedy.
Yes.
Because he was doing comedy. He didn't know that he was doing comedy.
Can you imagine
Sometimes he is trying to do comedy.
Imagine talking to either Joe Rogan or Donald Trump for 3 hours.
I know. It's crazy.
I can't. It's my brain does not compute that.
Yeah. I actually think, I know I told her to find the bunker.
She should have done Joe Rogan.
Well, they've been hinting about it, and some people were mad, some people weren't mad. I was mad just because people got mad initially when he endorsed Bernie. I think that, that is the perfect place
for her to go on too long?
To give 100 answers that are all 5 minutes or longer. Joe Rogan, no one on God's green earth would love to hear her pontificate about time and the meaning of it more than Joe Rogan and all of his 100 million listeners.
That's so true. They're listening to hours of boring content every time they turn on that program.
Right? Get her
there. A lot of fake philosophers.
Oh my God.
A lot of pop therapists.
Oh, for sure.
A lot of celebrities who are deep.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What's his name who reinvented math?
Who?
What's the actor? Terrence Howard.
Oh yeah, Terrence Howard. I forgot he'd reinvented math.
Yeah, I think he's talking about it on Joe Rogan.
Yeah, well, of course, that's what what you do on Joe Rogan.
You go on there.
Pontificating about the meaning of time would be ideal.
Kill it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, he pontificated on a few things. North Korea being one of them. He said that he urged Kim Jong-un to stop building his substantial weapons stockpile. He said, I said, do you ever do anything else? Why don't you go take it easy? Go to the beach, relax. This is Trump telling Kim Jong-un to go to the beach and relax. On Russia, he said that the war in Ukraine would have never happened because he would have said, I said, Vladimir, you're not going in. I used to talk to him all the time. I can't tell you what I told him because I think it would be inappropriate. But someday he'll tell you. But he would never have gone in. So some sort of weird secret that is too inappropriate to say on Joe Rogan.
Well, he would have just given him Ukraine. He wouldn't have to invade it.
Yeah.
I mean, he was mad at Ukraine already, so it was perfect.
Yeah, he said so Joe Rogan asked him for proof about the 2020 election being stolen, and he said, we'll do it another time. I would bring in papers that you would not believe. So many different papers.
We know he has a lot of papers.
I love that. So many different papers.
Various
Binders
papers.
Full of
Binders
women.
full of women.
And then at one point he said, I lost by I didn't lose. He corrected himself. And Rogan, you can hear him cackling when he does this.
Well, that's part of the Donald Trump thing is that he is doing a comedy bit for himself. You don't know what Donald Trump thinks and doesn't think because he reveals all of his thoughts to you, and they're all contradictory.
Sure.
But also, some of this is just a performance that he's really enjoying. So,
Sure.
the idea that everyone is having to hang on to his every word when he is just doing an improv performance for us right now is so insane.
Well, this last one is the best one because they got talking about extraterrestrial life, which again is why Kamala Harris should be going on Joe Rogan.
Yes.
Because I guarantee she's got thoughts.
She's got thoughts on that for sure. You're not going to get into the nature of time without thinking about extraterrestrial
What's
life.
going on other planets
Exactly.
and quantum physics and God knows what else.
Time
right?
jumps, black holes, everything.
That's exactly right. He said, so this is Trump. He said, there's no reason not to think that Mars and all these planets don't have life. And then he went on to refer about all these jet pilots seeing very strange things in the sky. And he said, well, Mars, we've had probes there and rovers. Oh, no, this is Joe Rogan. Sorry. Rogan says, well, Mars, we've had probes there and rovers, and I don't think there's any life there. And Trump said, maybe it's life that we don't know about.
You know
Which
what?
is exactly what it is because we don't.
We don't know. He's right.
So if there's life on Mars, then he's really onto something in that we're not aware that it's there.
That's right.
Because we do not, in fact.
He's correctly identified the problem. We have sent rovers there. And also you can't know what you don't know, and he has so eloquently pointed that out in this comment.
So stupid.
You don't know what you haven't found yet. You can't know about it if you haven't heard about it yet.
Oh God.
It's a philosopher.
This guy.
The two of them. And I feel like this is where Donald Trump, I think, shines as an entertainer. And why we should stop listening to the words he's saying. I feel like this is he loves to spend 3 hours rambling about whatever is on his mind.
Yeah.
The reason he loves being president is because he gets to do that.
For sure.
It's for the rallies. It's because he has an audience.
Yeah.
I feel like part of where the news has failed us, I'm not the first person to point this out, but I'm going to say it I just thought of it, is that they keep reporting on him like he's saying sentences that are meant to mean anything.
Right.
He's an entertainer. He's entertaining us. This is an entertaining set of quotes.
That's right.
It's the Trump Steaks press conference of quotes.
Yep.
I'm not going to apologize for thinking these are funny things. I don't think that this is a collection of ideas that makes you qualified to be the president.
No.
But we're having to talk his thoughts on Putin and, Kim Jong-un are
Right.
relevant to reality.
Right.
He's doing a bad comedy bit.
Yeah.
What? And the New York Times is out here making a false equivalency between him and Kamala Harris because she is long-winded. It's crazy.
It's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing.
Right.
In any case, in great news, Giuliani was told he has to give up all of his assets in his, including his penthouse apartment in the Georgia case. And so we're hoping that Rudy Giuliani is soon to be homeless.
Yeah.
would love...
I mean, he's couch surfed once.
I was going to say, I would love to think about which couches are available to him in this day and age, because I bet his gay car dealer friends are not
I was just about to say, he's really sort of ruined the amount of couches that I think are available to him.
Well, he'd already ruined it for these. He refused to marry them. After he slept on their couch on 9/11, he slept on their couch and refused to marry those guys. So I'm not hoping there's a couch available to him, but I have a lot of curiosity about which couches are.
Well, we're about to find out.
Especially because a lot of Trump associates have been essentially kicked out of New York, so he might have to move.
Yeah, he might have to go to Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah. Might have, well, hopefully for him, Donald Trump gets elected, he can move to D.C. and couch surf there.
Oh, that's, I bet, his master plan.
It has to be. But where's he going to live until then? That's January 20th? That's months from now.
That's months from now. Yeah.
Let's talk about Listeria and E. coli.
Listen, we don't have to talk about this for very long. But I had a moment earlier this week where I was talking to a friend of mine who was worried about this, and I didn't really know much about it.
Right.
There's been a listeria...
I still don't, so I'm excited to find out.
There's been a listeria outbreak. The worst one was at this Boar's Head plant in Virginia. But there's also been E. coli with, like, some onions, like, on Big Macs or something like that. So McDonald's has had to recall a bunch of different things.
Oh, yeah, didn't they have to recall them right after Donald Trump
I think so.
worked there for a day?
Yes, that's right. Yes, yeah. So we got some fun memes about that on Twitter. And so I dove into it a little bit because I was like, I guess maybe this is a thing. I mean, it's like being reported and like people are caring about it. And then I was like, this is a thing because I learned some things that I'm going to share with you.
Okay.
Here. Surprise, surprise. The Biden administration and the FDA or USDA or whoever the heck it is that oversees our food supply has been making huge cuts to testing these very things over the span of the last couple of years.
Perfect.
And this isn't going to be a thing where, like, I specifically, like, rage at Joe Biden over it. Because I have a feeling this was probably, like, it was a part of some budget cuts that probably a lot of Democrats were, like, really fucking proud of themselves for.
Right.
And Republicans, obviously. I'm sure this was sort of, like, given in concession to something that, like, oh, well, we don't have the money to do that. And it's like, okay, well, fine. And then also, specifically, this Boar's Head plant in Virginia, over the last 2 years, has had... I think it was like in the 60s amounts of different issues, like with their standards there. There's been reports, they've been fined, they've been had all sorts of things, but we just didn't do anything because it's like we're not doing anything.
Right.
I guess
we don't care.
And I guess the reason that this is making me mad is because I feel like people like to joke about how the government doesn't do anything. Right? Especially now, it's like, it's so deadlocked. There's all of this, like, we can't get anything done because there's too much political division and all of these things. And, like, I understand all of those things, right? But, like, on a very core level, like, our government making sure that, like, the food that gets served to us doesn't kill us is, like, actually maybe really all they're good for sometimes.
Yeah. And it's sort of like critical to why government exists.
It's literally why we have governments.
Right. Like a lot of stuff, libertarians are nuts, but there's a bunch of stuff we could probably figure out if we needed to independently.
Sure.
But like large scale food safety is the kind of thing that you actually need government for.
Right.
It's why government is important.
Right. And it's why I feel like we need to, and we've talked about this over the years around different topics, but like it's why I hate when Democrats run away from the idea that we need strong and good government.
Yes. Right. They often buy into this framing that, like, of course, we also want minimal government. We don't when it comes to things like this.
No. We need
there are things government needs to provide.
We need these agencies to be doing the testing, and we need them to be fixing the things when we find out that, like, maybe your cold cuts are going to kill you.
Well, and part of the problem also of buying into the sort of framing that the deficit is bad and that we also want to cut spending and we also want to lower taxes is that you end up making these kinds of cuts and then you can't make an argument for why these things are important. Whereas I feel like if you were willing to be like, it's actually worth paying for these things.
Right.
It is worth your tax dollars. I know that framing is problematic to us now.
Sure.
But it is worth our national resources, we'll call it.
There you go.
Going towards these priorities.
Right.
Even if it's expensive, because that is what government does for you.
Yes.
If you are ever like, I would love to be able to buy affordable lunch meat at the grocery store and not die,
right,
then you have stumbled into an area where government can help you.
Right. And also, by the way, another ancillary reason for why we should fix this. Every time something like this happens, an RFK Jr. supporter gets their wings.
Too true.
Because his whole thing is running on how shit the food supply here is.
Yeah.
Right? He's doing MAHA, or MAHA. I don't know what it is. Make America Healthy Again. Right? That's the whole thing. That's why he's going to be in Donald Trump's cabinet. That's why he's on the transition team.
That's right.
And, like, I'm not saying they're going to do any of that, obviously, because they're all fuck-ups, and Donald Trump doesn't care about it. He just wants his voters, and then he's going to just kick him out to the curb as soon as he gets in there. And Donald Trump doesn't care whether your cold cuts kill you or not.
Certainly not.
Certainly not.
Although he does love a Big Mac, probably.
He does love a Big Mac, so I guess on some level, maybe. But, like, you know, it's when government doesn't work that you get crazies pointing out that government doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, because a lot of the RFK kind of movement is built on claims that are credible at the beginning of the logical, sort of loop, and and just end up in a crazy place.
That's right.
Like, are you right to feel like the pharmaceutical companies are abusing us, and are you right to feel like the FDA is not regulating things quite correctly because there's corporate interest paying them off? You're right to feel all of those things.
Yeah.
You should also get a fucking COVID vaccine. Like,
right.
You should do the things that make it possible for us to exist in society, knowing that things aren't perfect. It's not a perfect COVID vaccine. It's millions of people have gotten it, and it hasn't killed them.
But they wouldn't have to be worrying about these things if the government wasn't fucking up so often.
Exactly. It's like a failure it's like a loop you end up in.
Totally.
Where it seems like government doesn't work because government isn't working because you've defunded government because you didn't believe it didn't work. It worked.
Right.
If you just paid to have government work, you would find, like they find frequently all over Europe, that things are easier for everyone because government is just working.
That's right.
You're paying high taxes, but you don't die all the time.
That's right.
It's like,
you pay high taxes, but you don't die all the time.
It's so much easier.
That should be the Democrats' message.
Yes. Your taxes will be high and your expenses will go down because you won't be constantly on death's door. Right. The funeral costs will save you. We'll save you money on funeral costs.
Oh, God.
It's just like, it's a framing that only makes sense when failures like this are allowed to happen under the people who theoretically support big government.
That's right.
And so then it seems like government, it's like, well, Democrats are in power, there must be big government, so obviously government doesn't work.
Yes.
And instead what we have is Republicans who are pretending to be Democrats.
Right. And you have too many Democrats also, to your point earlier, being out there and be like, well, you're right, government's stupid.
Right. Right. It's like, stop
doing that.
Stop talking about the deficit. At the end of the day, we'll bring it all back to MMT.
Let's do it.
Yeah. It's anyway, that's the news.
Yeah.
The only other important news that I wanted to mention is that even formerly apolitical Stevie Nicks has revealed herself. I knew this because I'm on COVID conscious Twitter, but has revealed herself to be a regular masker. And went on a long tirade recently during an interview where she was giving up all sorts of gossip about how annoying it is that people make her feel uncomfortable for wearing a mask. So if you are a person who is facing feelings of discomfort around other people wearing masks,
you've got a friend.
You should mind your business, and you should remember that Stevie Nicks thinks you're an asshole.
Yeah.
Like, And if you're a masker...
Oh, that's what I meant. If you're a masker, you've got a friend in Stevie Nicks.
If you're a masker, you have a friend in Stevie Nicks. If you're not a masker and you've been making other people uncomfortable for masking... Fuck off.
Yeah.
Get
a life, for God's sake.
Get a life.
I mean...
But even Stevie Nicks knows you're an asshole. This woman didn't vote till she was 70, according to her. So, even she knows you're an asshole? That's...
Come on.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the news. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
It'll be scary, because the election will be coming.
Oh, my God.
We'll be here.
Yeah.
Reporting on early voting totals that we don't understand what they mean.
That's right.
Talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.